All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those people out there. Welcome to Grail Country. I'm super excited about this conversation. It's been in the makings for months. We had to wait for Luke's babies to grow up a little bit. Both Luke's, actually. Yeah, I thought what we would do, I thought, well, how can I start this? What should I, and then I thought, you know what, we're just going to do introductions. And I think that way things will organically develop as they do. So we're here because we're all souls of the soil. And that has plays a significant role in our lives and in, utilitarian ways, in health-wise, spiritually, emotionally, everything. So, and I kind of want to, explore all those different things. So I'm going to start with you, Luke Freeman. Give us a little introduction of, first of all, let me just qualify that, who you are and so on, what your life is like right now, but also why, maybe I could say it this way, why you think this conversation is an important one, because I think we all do, actually.
Okay. Well, Luke Freeman, I'm here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I am in my backyard office shed, which we put in the backyard after we had our second set of twins, just to free up space in our house. So my life right now is a little crazy. We've got twin boys who are 3 years old, and then another set of twin boys who are 4 months old. The reaction is always priceless. So, I mean, honestly, I'm just at this point trying to keep my head above water, but they're all healthy. Yeah, great. Blessed with a beautiful family. A lot to be grateful for. But I guess why I'm here, I didn't grow up farming, but I fell in love with farming in college and decided to devote my career to that. So I got an undergrad in sustainable agriculture from University of Missouri, and then ended up getting a master's in horticulture from University of Arkansas. And I've been working on like horticulture research, a lot of it involving organic crop production. And I think a relevant detail is I feel like I have come in and out of love with farming and with the land, and that's very much tracked my spiritual journey. And I will say I am kind of recovering from like a disenchantment, I think, brought on by more of a scientific worldview. And so I think I'm in a place where I'm open again to the spiritual connection with the land, and very much related to what you talk about, Michael, with sophiology, and I think your relationship with the land. Anyway, I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. I feel like why it's important is that, yeah, I mean, I think the future of our civilization depends on how we treat the soil.
Mm.
And not only that, but our spiritual health, I think, depends on a, connection with the land. So I'll just leave it there. Oh, sorry. One more thing. I feel like I always leave stuff out in introductions, but we've got a little hobby farm right outside Fayetteville. So 3 acres, and right now we've got chickens and a large garden. We had goats for a time, but I got tired of them getting out of the fence and getting into the garden. So
they're good at that.
sticking with chickens right now. But yeah, I'd love to do more with the farm. The goal when we bought it was to do some market farming, but then we started a business and had kids. But I think once the boys are big enough, we'll probably be able to do some more market farming with it. But anyway, I think that's it for me.
That's great. Luke Johnston, you want to go next?
Yes. My name's Luke. I'm going by Lukey, and I have for a little bit. Anyways, I live in just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a little town called Marne. So, was in an urban environment for the first like 3-4 years of my wife's and I's marriage, and we tended a small garden, what we could grow in partial shade in a large city, and then we moved out here to what is a house that oh my goodness, we've been in here a year, and we've just kind of spread ourselves so incredibly thin trying to do so many different things, because this house was built in I think the late 1800s. So yeah, we basically had to rebuild the majority of it, and or at least the back half of it, and man, put in the garden. My wife, gosh, well, let me start here too, because I don't even know where to begin with this whole thing. But like you said, like you fell into some kind of disenchantment of some sort. Like gardening has been the mode of recovery from what was sort of like a incredibly dark, depressed time in my life. My parents raised us gardening, and like when I was going through a crisis of depression later on in life, I ended up leaving college and having to like move home because I was so crippled, because I left to move across the nation and live in Spokane, Washington for a few years, and I ended up moving home because I couldn't really handle what was occurring in my life at that time. And in order to gain some sort of stability, I moved home and resurrected the garden in my parents' backyard, and that had been dormant for quite some time. And it was through this process of like therapy, and gosh, I went down the psychopharmaceutical road for way too long. And anyways, also it happened to be sort of like deconstruction process for me, of my own faith at the time, and then the sort of reemergence of my faith. But it was suddenly bound to a whole nother, it was bound to the womb of the earth, in a whole new way. And I was experiencing what was a completely new, mode of encountering reality and God. And wow, it happened to coincide also with having some really good like philosophy and literature professors when I studied creative writing in my undergrad, and man, that was a lifesaver, running into like a couple professors that were total contrarians to the university that I was going to, which is since like in a state of collapse, and now they've lost their jobs and they've completely removed the humanities department. And oh man. So anyways, there's a variety of avenues into this. My wife and I too, like when I met her, oh man, we'll be married 8 years next year. So we're man, when I met her, gosh, what were we doing? I was fishing pretty much every day and supplying a local farm to table restaurant with salmon that I was catching in the river. And it was like a completely illegal operation. And I was painting at the time. And there was only a loophole, because guess what? You can serve catch of the day. You can serve catch of the day and supposedly slip around these regulations around sport fishing licenses, commercial fishing licenses. And anyways, I was doing this thing that I shouldn't have been doing the restaurant failed too. So, or at least it changed ownership and then collapsed. They need this guy making these robust moves into this contrarian way of life. But anyways, all that to say is my wife started botanically dying. And so then like our gardens completely merged with like, okay, I'm interested in vegetable gardening. You're interested in botanical dyes. So now we like grow a bunch of botanical dyes. She grows, or she's got her own business, which is called Soil Studio, which is like, it's gone up and down over the years because we're having kids and she's taking a step back and now she's getting back into it again. And it's, life's crazy right now with these little kids running around too. Like, I started a small business. I went back to school because what was I going to do with a creative writing degree? Gosh, like write copy for designer purses. Like, I don't know. I ended up going back to school and getting my builder's license. And so now I own a very small construction business. I'm a contractor who has never pulled a permit in his life because I don't attract customers that want to pull permits. I attract the farmer down the road who wants me to fix his collapsing cow barn or whatever, and then he'll give me some hay, or whatever. I really love alternative economies too. Like that's a whole nother can of worms. But anyways, hopefully that sums it up.
That was awesome. Michael, you want to give us a little intro?
Yes, I have my theme music in the background. My 13-year-old son is practicing the piano.
It's good.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the soil in farming and stuff because today is one of our CSA days here on my small 10-acre farm in Waterloo Township, Michigan. Not really too far from Lukey.
Yeah.
Grand Rapids is about 2 hours away, 2.5 maybe. But like you said, it's a crapshoot, right? So this year we only had 17 or 18 people in our CSA, whereas last year was 40. So you can't depend on it. You know what I mean?
No.
So, but that's okay. It's okay. That's okay. So I've been doing biodynamics for, well, as long as I've been married. We've been married 32 years. So 32 years at least I've been doing biodynamics. And right now, besides our market garden, which is probably less than an acre, which actually grows enough food for 40 families.
Mm-hmm.
So we right now we're doing that. We always have chickens. We earlier in the season we did ducks, so they're in the freezer. We in the past have done we've raised hogs, which if you're interested, they're pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
Hogs are pretty easy. But we got out of it because my wife, because of the thing that came out 4 years ago that hurt a lot of people's health. My wife caught it by shedding and ended up with cancer of the uterus. And so she switched to a non-pork diet as a way to keep cancer at bay. So we have, which is a drag because, it's a drag that she had cancer, but it's also a drag that we can't raise hogs anymore. Because if God didn't want us to eat hogs, he wouldn't have made them out of bacon, right? Though we do cheat and have some bacon once in a while, which I still actually have. I just cured the last of, somebody gave me a pork belly. I cured it recently. Going through our last week. And we had dairy cows in the past, but we don't have a ton of pasture. About half of our property is in woods. So it wasn't worth the expense of buying hay all winter if I couldn't make my own hay or trade for something. So we got out of that and actually moved to something that's much easier and less time consuming, which is, and Shari's into this. lambs, which they're much easier. We've done goats in the past. We had dairy goats for decades. Lambs are so much easier than goats. They don't try to get out, and they behave themselves. Except for the ram, you got to teach them who's boss once in a while. We've done. What else have we done? We do geese. We didn't do any geese this year. My wife doesn't like goose that much, so we didn't do any geese. Though I love it. And we raise bees as well, which is a challenge. Bees are hard. Yeah. Though because we raise bees, I make a lot of mead. In fact, I just got 2 books today that came in the mail.
Ooh, nice.
Not that I needed any more books on mead, but I just needed more books on mead, right?
I love this.
When I talked to Martin Shaw, he said, "Of sinners, whom I am the first," right? About buying books about mead. So that's, and we do some maple sugaring in the spring. Though it screwed up this year because I had to go out of town for something, and all the sap that I was holding, it got warm while I was holding it, and it was spoiled. By the time I got home, I was pissed. So we ended up with only a little bit of syrup, and I was planning on gallons. But that's what happens, right? That's what happens in the farming game, guys.
Yeah.
Not to mention other kinds of. But we also, we forage for mushrooms, and we take from the woods. So we hunt, and actually, my son and I were out hiking in the woods the other day. Yesterday, checking for buck rubs, seeing how many squirrels were around. So rabbits, turkeys. So we live off the land as much as possible. And as you guys were saying, for us, it started out and has remained, connected to our spiritual lives, our religious lives.
Yeah.
Because I wrote some books on sociology, and the thing is, if you see what I talk about when I talk about sociology, it's very different than most people, because most people, it's like an intellectual trip, right? It's an academic subject of inquiry, and I don't think about it that way at all. For me, sociology is about as practical as it gets. It's the marriage of heaven and earth, right? And I think a great image of that is how in the Catholic Church, anyway, and to a degree in the Anglican Church, the agricultural cycle was kind of parallel to the see. I just heard something. The agricultural cycle was parallel to the liturgical cycle, which it's not really the case anymore in the Catholic Church. You have what did they call it? Liturgical cycle A, B, and C. It sounds like like a diagnostic manual. It used to be connected to the earth, and you hear people talk about wanting to change the date of Easter, right? Or to have the way we can get the Orthodox and the Western Christians together is that we can fix the date of Easter. Yuck! A lot of people don't know that and I'm surprised that even like practicing Christians don't know that the way the date of Easter is fixed is it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. Tell me that's not esoteric. Tell me that's not cosmic and earthly at the same time.
Right.
So that's where we are. So that's our thing over here.
Love it. I'll just do a little short intro for those that don't know already, but I've talked about this at length. But my husband and I were living in Switzerland. When we got married, I'm Canadian, he's Swiss. We got married in 1986, moved to Switzerland, lived there for 11 years, always with the goal in mind to do what we're doing now, homesteading, and moved back to Canada in 97 and bought a place in the far north of British Columbia. We had 30 acres there, one really good greenhouse, 2 broken, beat up greenhouses, and a shack. And we just threw ourselves into it for 3 full years, almost killed ourselves, to be honest with you. Like, we were clearing land and planting a huge garden and self-sustaining and homeschooling and heating with wood and no electricity and the whole 9 yards. And then, of course, we forgot that winter has like almost no daylight up there. So that was fun. And then we moved to where we are now in 2000, and we've been here doing the same thing, basically. We tried not to get a job outside of home, only to sustain our goals. So, you know, put food on the table, but actually we did that pretty good. Maybe clothes on the kids' backs, something like that. Gas in the car. Any overhead, but we were lucky because we could take the money that we got from selling our home in Switzerland and live with like almost no overhead. We didn't have any debt. So, yeah, and we've been doing that for years. We've had lots of livestock. We've had Highland cattle. We've had goats. We've had pigs. We've had chickens. I have 3 geese out here who are, every time I do a Zoom call, they want to stand in the sliding glass doors and stare at me. I don't know why. They're really annoying. They're just out there right now looking at me and stealing grapes off my grapevine. I see you. 3 dogs and a cat. And we raised 3 children. They're all grown up. And I have 5 grandchildren. And I think that's it. So, yeah, one of the things I was excited about was connecting Michael and Luke because they're so close to each other. And Luke and I talk quite often. Lukey and I talk quite often. And I know he's just got into bees, and it's been a huge learning curve. And I'm like, you need to go visit Michael.
Oh man, I just finished Steiner's lectures on bees. Oh, they're crazy.
That's one of the best things he has out there.
I think so. Yeah, honestly, I tried to read Knowledge of Higher Worlds, and I was like, why did I start there? Why not start with bees? That sounds way better. So yeah, it's been eye-opening. But
and he's funny in those beekeeping lectures too.
He is.
When he predicts the collapse of the bee industry. Did you catch that?
Oh yeah.
Mr. Mueller's asking him, about, well, we're doing these things. We're getting great results with artificial queen making and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. Check with me in 60 years.
Yeah, he goes, we're messing with what's occurring naturally, like by splitting all these hives and not letting them naturally swarm and whatever. I just lost. Well, here's a great thing: is I lost the largest colony. They something collapsed. I found some small hive beetles in there, but I noticed they were getting robbed, and I was like, oh, they're gone. This all happened in about a week's time, and I don't check on my bees often. I kind of just whatever, But anyways,
they're hard.
Yeah, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just caught some swarms this spring, and I was like, I better put some beehives up, figure this out while tending to these small children. And then I got obsessed and started listening to like 80 hours a week of bee content, and I found out that it's the most like everybody has these opinions, and I was like, gosh, I can't trust anybody. I got to just trust intuition on this. And then so anyways, I got some honey. I got some cottage cheese. That's kind of like my takeaway from that book. Maybe these should be a part of my diet every day. So.
Yeah, I was just actually, speaking of honey, I'll just got to read you this. This book got here an hour ago. I read the introduction already. There was some great choice quotes about this. I mean, thus honey was considered a giver of life, and the bee was associated with the souls of men and was a messenger of the gods. I'm in, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's the truth, and especially mead. Have you ever? I actually started making mead. I don't know when we moved here, so 8 years ago. I started making mead, and at first I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But after a while, I got to be pretty good at it. My wife's like, "You're so good at this. We should start a meadery." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to deal with the Michigan Department of Health and all the other stuff. They're evil." As you know, Luke knows, we live in a state run by a sociopath. And her mean girl accomplices. It's like those mean girls. It is. It's like the Mean Girls, but somebody gave the Mean Girls absolute power instead. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's the truth. And
Michael,
their faces, they're so Botoxed out. They look like their face is about to stretch off their heads.
Well, I've got a good solution for this. Let's kick back a couple of meads. I'll come over and play with your Cloudbuster, and we'll have a good
Oh yeah, know about the Cloudbuster. I was actually, there were some chemtrails today. I was blasting them this morning.
It's amazing.
Okay, Luke.
Boiling a pot of vinegar.
Luke Freeman. You just look like you're just soaking this up. What are you thinking about?
Well, just the direction. We'll take it. I watched that video that you sent us, Shari. I watched that last night, and that was absolutely amazing.
What video? I can't remember. It's so long ago.
Sophia Logos.
The Sophia Logos.
Oh, yes.
He clipped Michael from the Regeneration Pod, and then had RFK Jr., talking to Tucker Carlson, and then a lot of other great stuff. Made a ton of connections. Which you'll definitely have to link to it in the show notes or whatever. But I think one thing that really struck out to me, and I think this was clipped, Michael, from your conversation on your podcast, was the reign of quantity. And I feel like this is something I've definitely seen in my own life. So, as I kind of mentioned in my introduction, what got me into farming was love. I fell in love with it. It was kind of in a urban ag setting, but just that idea of turning urban lots into gardens and turning food waste into compost, kind of that waste into fertility, and kind of urban detritus into, fecundity and abundance. It really captivated my imagination. Anyway, fell in love with it. But, for practical reasons, I had to pursue a more professional route, working jobs.
You mean to make a living? Yeah.
To make a living,
Yeah.
I got married. So my wife and I got married in college. So, right out of college, I had to work a job with insurance, and, I wasn't able to do the whole, living in a yurt, getting paid in vegetables thing that, a lot of my friends did who are into organic farming. But I think, part of that for me, I've seen, going the more professional route and then getting, a master's in horticulture, was it that I think the reign of quantity and that mindset, that scientific mindset that tries to quantify everything. I mean, even in the organic world, you're trying to quantify the effect of organic management techniques, compare that to conventional management techniques. It's all about quantifying. And I mean, what that did for me, in just my relationship with farming and in my spiritual life, I mean, it drained the love out of my relationship with farming. For my master's work, I was doing research on cover crops and grew tomatoes after the cover crop, the winter cover crop. And I was there, collecting, measuring leaf chlorophyll, so I was there with the tool, measuring 50 leaf samples at a time. That was not why I got into it, to be there, taking measurements and writing numbers and running statistical analyses. That's kind of what I found myself doing. But I feel like, so so for me, it's like that being subject to the reign of quantity led to a disenchantment. And I kind of bottomed out. I just had to step away from farming and then realize that it was such a part of me. Like it had roots in me. Like I wasn't myself without having some kind of relationship with the land. I wasn't whole without it. And really it was around when we had our first set of twins. So that was 3 years ago. I was able to find my way back into it. And that very much tracked with a spiritual journey. And, you know, finding my way back to a relationship with God through, I mean, quite honestly, more of that philosophical, you know, C.S. Lewis, Bishop Barrett route. And so, and Michael, just the way you talk about sociology, it makes so much sense to me. It makes so much sense. It's bringing heaven and earth together in a way that I feel like I'm still in a process of healing and reconciling those two, reconciling the head and the heart. But I think where those two can come together and you can see that union is absolutely, you know, in the garden or on the farm is seeing a proper relationship there. But I don't know. I felt like that might be a fruitful discussion, kind of an antidote to the reign of quantity.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we started when we got married, we were renting a house in the suburbs of Detroit and had this little garden. And there's a photograph I have someplace of my wife and myself and our oldest son in that garden. And the thing is, at that time, I was training to be a Waldorf teacher, and a really good friend of mine was really great gardener, and he had been trained by Alan York. If you know who that is, Alan York was a huge figure in biodynamic farming in the last generation, and he died, I don't know, 7 years ago at the age of 64. But he was the guy. In fact, we would call him. I called him on the phone one day. He was in California at the time. He's from Texas, but he was in California. But they had run a garden together in Detroit, and it was beautiful. It was at a Franciscan abbey, and I used to go there when I was a kid. I had no idea that it was even connected to anything like that. I just thought it was the monks doing it, but it was apparently my future friends. But what happened with Alan? We called him on the phone. And my friend Mike said, "Yeah, because there were no CSAs. There were no CSAs. There was one in Michigan that was just about hadn't even started yet, but they were talking about starting one. There was none. And now, actually, I think from where I'm sitting, within 15 miles, there's about 10, right? So this is early days of the CSA movement. And if people don't know, who are listening, don't know, it means community supported agriculture, which is buying directly from the farmer, basically. So we called Alan, and he said, "No, I just sold all my stuff, man." I said, "You sold it? Why?" "Doing too much consulting." "Consulting for what?" And he goes, "Wineries." "Wineries? What are you talking about?" And this was 30 years ago. And he started doing all this consulting for the wine industry because the vineyards were all dying. And they didn't have, and they were predicting back then that the viticulture maybe had 20 years to go. And so out of desperation, a couple wineries, one of them was the Benziger winery. They appealed to Alan. They heard about biodynamics. "Let's look up this guy." And they called him, and he consulted, and he turned their dying vineyard into a flourishing oasis. And if you actually, there's you can find clips of it. There's a documentary called "The Challenge of Rudolf Steiner." It's like a long 2-part thing, but you can find clips of it on the Benziger winery, which is really cool. So I was all in, right, when we heard about this, and I still didn't know how I was going to get any land, which took us years till we could. But I remember, so my friend Mike and I we had a study group on the agriculture lectures by Steiner. and he talks about making the biodynamic preparations, which, if you don't know, some of them are made with cow horns, stuffed with cow manure and buried in the earth over the winter months. Or there's another one that's yarrow flowers put into a stag's bladder, left out in the sun for the summer, and then buried in the earth for the winter. It all sounds like witchcraft, and it was fun. But I was like, I can't just read about this stuff. I got to do it. Let's do it. And here we are living in this little house in the suburbs that we're renting in Detroit, the Detroit area. And I'm like, I got to get some of these animal parts. Where do I get them? So I started calling slaughterhouses. And I was getting in the mail. So I don't think you can do this now. I was getting I got a couple of sheep skulls in the mail one time, and they were still bloody. And I got, a bunch of cow horns that were also still bloody in the mail, and there was blood on the package. And then the Jehovah's Witnesses would come and like, hey, and my friend would be like, hey, why don't I put these animal skulls? I'm like, oh yeah. So I started experimenting back then, and and what happened, part of that is it's not just doing this, bizarre thing, but also it grounds you in the cycle of the year, right? And it makes you attentive to, basically, when you make the biodynamic preparations, it's basically homeopathic compost in a way, right? Homeopathic remedies for compost. And and that kind of, because a lot of people think in their spiritual lives, it's all about your vibe, right? At peace with myself and with the world. But you ever see the movie Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood, where he plays this this kind of ghostly creature figure, and there's this part where the miners are trying to break open some rocks, and he goes, "Mind if I help a little?" Well, we don't have any preaching work for you to do, and he's like, "Preaching work ain't worth nothing without a little hard work," right? So, and you realize, I'm talking to contractor here, right? That spiritual work is physical activity, is changing the world through your activity, through whatever you do to your farm or your garden, or any kinds of handwork, or even sourdough bread making, or milking a cow, or whatever, is far more spiritual than, because you're connected with the cycles of living and dying. It's far more spiritual than people who are going on retreat and living as hermits or whatever. You know what I mean? They're into their whole I'm not part of the world vibe, right? I'm renouncing the world. And I was like that for a time in my 20s, where I renounced the world. But what healed me, as you guys were saying, was reconnecting to the world through the soil, right? And that's for me, that was the seed, or the birth of self-theology inside of me. That's where it started.
Yeah. Yeah. Thoughts, Lukey?
Yeah, lots of them. I'm trying to touch back on what Luke was saying too. I don't even know how to get back there.
Been using it for years at least.
This morning, I've been prepping garlic beds out back, and trying to mulch around. I'm trying to mulch around this asparagus crop that I planted, and though we don't pull the majority of our sustenance out of this garden at all, it's probably like a quarter of what we consume, but and we're right next to this marsh, so there's a marsh out back. It's a vernal pool that dries up, but it's these two almost perfect agricultural soil types are slamming up against each other right here on this property. In fact, I think I could pull up a line and it can show you exactly where it divides on our property. And it's I'm like farming right at this divide, and I've got these deep channels that have to drain like a ton. I'm like trying to farm in a mix between muck and clay, you know, and it's insane the amount of moisture that this land holds, and it's so fertile. I cannot like figure out like what path I should take to like get this even back into a productive spot, because this is an old farm. It's an old farm that you're working with, and it's like, how do you how do you bring this back into some kind of order where a bunch of invasives have taken over everything? And I don't even know if I can begin to even consider what combating those looks like. And you know, and I don't know if it's even worth doing. But anyways, I don't know. I'm like trying to get back to this idea, I suppose, is like, here I am out in the garden this morning, and I am actually slipping into a completely different mode of consciousness in a certain sense as I'm out there working, because this is exactly where I want to be, you know? And I'm building this life around what will hopefully become in the distant future. I hope one day I can walk out back, and maybe it's not here, maybe it's somewhere else, but I hope I can walk out back, and I hope it's not too nostalgic to think that I could like make my living off this land, you know, and walk out my backyard, and if it's a shop out back or my wife's studio or the garden, we're at least making strides towards what is for us a sort of beatific vision of and I don't even know where this vision comes from. I suppose the Garden of Eden, you know, but it's informing me on a level now because I'm actually seeing it. I'm seeing the abundance emerging from this literally 1/8 of an acre size plot. And it's like, I don't even know what to do with the emergence. The fertility that's there, it like is seducing me in a way that I suppose it always has, but I sort of lost those sensibilities that I once had in childhood, where like the natural world was drawing me into it more deeply. And my imagination was absolutely, it was unbridled by almost anything. And I was so deeply immersed in I'll get emotional talking about it, but it's like somehow that was like ripped out of me. And I don't think that was by anything but design, by to a certain extent, you know. But also, then I suppose there is a natural like progression that needs to take place. And I'm thinking of Barfield when he's talking about, you know, a withdrawal from participation, and so, you know, original participation, withdrawal, and then final participation. But this like, this kind of U-shaped journey has had to occur. But like, I don't know where I'm going with all of this, but there's a I'm encountering something that imbues my life with so much meaning that if I stepped away from it now, I don't know. I think this is where all my stability comes from. I don't think it's where a fraction of my stability comes from. I think it's like I would lose my freaking mind if I was not like fishing and hunting and beekeeping, and like I'm a very probably like I'm on the edge of sanity, I feel like, already, and it's like, you know, it's like if I didn't bury my hands into the soil, I would lose my mind. And this is like the only thing that's orienting me. But I am encountering like real. And I think that that's what I think of even, like this is like a deeper penetration into the seasons and the patterns. And like, I'm thinking of like, even you've got your biodynamic preparation, and I've got like my 10 5-gallon buckets full of salmon guts and molasses that I'm, making a fish emulsion with, and trying to add it to the garden. And it's just like, well, I'm just riding my intuition. I'm like, I don't got a bullhorn, but I've got a couple 5-gallon buckets and a bunch of salmon carcasses. So like, and yeah, it's amazing because even just like, even like some little thing like that, and I've got to dilute that stuff down and figure out how to apply it because, oh my gosh, it is potent. I opened it up today and I'm thinking, this is what 5 years of decomposition in a bucket looks like. And the salmon eggs aren't even dissolved. I don't know what those salmon eggs are made out of, but they're still like, but I'm going to throw those in there anyways. And, and all of this is just like super learning curve for me, because I don't have any like formal education in it. So it's just like experimenting all the time. Like I ended up putting probably way too many, like, okay, I got really into like this idea of doing a food forest, and it's like, come on, like this is, I got to rein it in. This is way too intense. But I'm putting in all these medicinal herbs and stuff like that. And it's like, they're probably going to take over this lot, talking about invasive species. And it's like, I'm probably pushing the pedal down too hard in some ways. But there's a fire that's lit underneath of me, is what I'm trying to say. That's like, I can't even seem to reach my tentacles as deeply as I want to. Like I want, like it's just so, I see the abundance now, and it's like, and it can be as simple as that, the walking out to your back porch and seeing the flowering plant and the abundance of seed that comes off one stupid plant. And it's like, you don't have to go any further than that to see that this world, the myth of scarcity. I mean, it is just like,
amen. Well, that's the thing. You hear that all the time, don't you, in the media? There's not enough. We're overpopulated. La 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 la. I'm like, you. No, the problem on a farm is controlling abundance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We have an abundance of thistles at the moment. It's just like, oh, we were trying to be kind to them for a long time, but they weren't very kind to us. And I found out that they have these underground root systems that just keep popping up. And then they started moving into our pastures, and we had to declare like all out war on them, unfortunately. But, like when you were talking about how you just can't get enough, Luke, like I just get this sense, Lukey, I get a sense from you that, you just want to see it all coming, like popping and growing, and, and maybe it's going to take over your, your place eventually. But the beautiful thing about that to me is that, first of all, you're saying yes to life, right? And you're enjoying the fact that it's bursting forth in gratitude, right? To you. Like there's a reciprocal relationship there between you and all the things that you're allowing to be in the world, and eventually they're going to say, thank you so much, Luke, but you don't know me, and I'm going to take over everything in your yard. and then you're going to have a little argument, and you're going to be like, no, not today. I'm going to rein you in. And, and so you're literally having a conversation with everything around you. And I think that's where sociology, for me anyway, that's where sociology really shines, because I mean, sociology is wisdom, and wisdom is gleaned through dialogue, and you are in a dialogue with the land, right? like I talked about digging my irrigation ditches this year, and they're old irrigation ditches that they were put in there in the 30s. And so they were still like, in the soil, right? And I wanted to open up some that weren't open. And and I'm doing it, and I'm watching the lay of the land because I want to let the water out where it's going to spread the furthest. And then I go, okay, that looks like a good spot. So I go over there with my shovel, to dig a little trench so the water can ease out. And lo and behold, there's a stone there because that's where they let the water out, right? And now I'm in contact with this ancestral thing that is just, I can't even explain what it does to me, but it just feels so exhilarating, right? I'm in the 30s, right? I've immersed myself into the 1930s, and I'm some dirt farmer trying to squeeze a living out of the land before winter comes,
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole thing, like you're in a story. You're in a story, And like when I got my sheep because I got into spinning. And I'm the kind of person who I don't want to buy my pre-dyed, pre-washed wool at some outlet somewhere in China. So I bought sheep, And
You went direct to the source. That's
I
right.
went directly to the source. But I thought, you know what? I can't understand the medium if I don't engage with it right there, right from the beginning. And I've learned so much about the quality of fleece and what they need, how much browse they need. I've watched my fleeces change colors depending on the vegetation that year, depending on the weather. Sometimes I have all gray. Sometimes I've got some white where I've never had white before on sheep that grew gray before, and I'm just fascinated. And then when I was learning to spin, I learned how to spin like on a spindle very primitively. And I was plying. That's when you actually make the yarn and you put two strands together. I learned how to ply. My first ply was a Navajo ply, because normally you ply from two separate bobbins and you wind those two yarn, or singles they're called, together. But the Navajo would ply from a single bobbin, and they would get a 3-ply, and they had this interesting, they would make a loop around their wrist and pull the thing through, and just kind of, and it was like a big chain really, but you couldn't detect the chain in the finished yarn. It just looked like a 3-ply. And it was so ingenious because they probably didn't have a lot of, supplies, right? Bobbins and stuff. They were working with really simple tools. And I did all that for the sole purpose of immersing myself in some kind of ancestral wisdom. I wanted to be there and feel it and struggle with the same problems that they struggled with and see the same results that they saw and have the same joy that they had, or the same frustrations that they had. And so I don't know what I'm just kind of bubbling up here stuff, but there's something very ancient also about ancestral, and for me anyways, there's whispers from the past. I don't know if you guys have that feeling when you're working on the land, but there's whispers, like there's voices, and it's not schizophrenia,
No.
Well,
I told you the story. Remember I told you, Shari, that my last book, what's it called? Mythologies of the Wild of God, which is a book of poetry that I was originally, my idea with the book was just, to reimagine some of the stories and legends that lived in me ever since I was a kid, like King Arthur and stuff. But after a while, it changed into seeing what stories the land around here had to tell me, which was shocking.
Yes.
Which was kind of, that's my favorite part of the book, because I was like, whoa. In fact, when we were walking out in the woods yesterday, I was thinking, oh yeah, this is where that poem takes place here, where it's kind of almost mythic or a legend, like a fairy tale, like some of the poems in there, because I was just listening to what the land had to say, which was kind of surprising.
Right.
But the thing that you guys have been talking about, this, all of these examples are examples of being open to life, open to the world, and open to fertility. I mean, come on, we have a guy with two sets of twins here. I have 9 kids of my own, right? And but we don't. I mean, as we know, we don't live in a culture that is open to life, that treats fertility as a disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a medical condition that needs taken care of.
Yeah.
And it's also closed to the spirit, and it's closed to fairy tales. It's closed to enchantment. And the thing is, it's not we live in a disenchanted world. We've become disenchanted. Not me, but people have. We were talking about education, right? The education of quantity and the shitty education we get through K through 12, not just K through 12, K through graduate school, just breeds the imagination out of people.
Right.
And people don't get it, right? People defend that poisonous system as if it's a societal good. And I know, because I was inside. And people, I have a big criticism of colleges and universities and the bullshit that goes on in them. And people think I'm just being too hard. No, I'm not. I know how sausage is made. Right?
Yeah.
I've been there, right? Don't tell me, you don't tell somebody who's done it for a living how it works, right? And I think that one of the greatest proponents of homeschooling was John Taylor Gatto, if you know who that is. And he was a public school teacher, and he realized how absolutely effed up it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you don't want to put your kids into school. It's the worst thing you could do. It's the worst you could do for society. And that you see this, like where I live, I don't know if it's true for you, Luki, but where we live, the Amish have been invading. It's like a stealth invasion of the Amish, and they're spreading. Right, and they're all. I mean, talk about open to life. These people all have 8 or 15, how many kids, right? They all have flourishing businesses, and they all work their butts off, but they're just happy people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot to learn from them in that regard. And they're about as Christian anarchist as you can get, right? And there's so much to learn from them, but we don't learn from them. We learn from the Michigan Mean Girls, who shut down raw milk production, or shut down. What else did they shut down? They shut down milk raw. They don't want people to have raw milk. They shut down. Actually, they were going after some Amish butchers recently, and they were going after. There's a co-op that's maybe 20 miles. Not even that. That all these farmers are bringing their produce to, including raw milk cheeses and organically raised beef, and they made them throw it all out. The Michigan Department of Agriculture, because they're the devil and we're the good guys.
Luke Freeman, you got thoughts on that?
I mean, that just, to me, speaks to that desire for control. I mean, to not allow an exception. And I feel this tension we're describing so much. I mean, with raising 4 kids in a small house, prioritizing things that are countercultural. I mean, we love where we live. We're not gonna move to have a bigger house without land. And we feel like our 4 boys will be fine sharing 1 bedroom, just throw 2 bunk beds in there. I think, having a sense of place is so much more important. But I feel like just around me, it's almost like a spiritual war in terms of, am I prioritizing the right things in life? Because the way we're living and what we do, we're not going to be able to give our kids a college fund, but we hope to give them a good education. I mean, we're looking at homeschooling, or at least doing some kind of homeschool co-op with friends of ours, and having land-based education be a big part of that. But the idea is, to raise them up, to empower them, to fill them up, but not with like money in a bank account, or each with
Right.
their own bedroom, or I don't know, each with their own car. But it's so countercultural, and I think it can a lot of times I can wonder if we're doing all this the wrong way. But then conversations like this bring me back. They ground me,
Oh, good.
about
Well,
what's actually most important.
right.
But
Well,
being open to life, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, having 4 kids, 3 and under, is not easy.
No.
It's not easy. It's required many small deaths on my part.
Well, yeah, I mean,
many
but
little ego deaths.
well, the same, I mean, we have 9, right? And that, in fact, as we were going through life, dropping more kids along the way, people thought we were insane. One time, my wife was at the midwife. She had a midwife appointment. I think she was on either number 4 or number 5. I can't remember. And she goes into the midwife appointment with all these little kids with her, right? I think the oldest one had been 5 or 6. And she goes in there, and as she was going in, a woman and her mom were coming out, and the woman's mom looked at her and said, "Oh my gosh, 5 kids under the age of 5? What are you really good Catholics, or just oversexed?" And my wife said, "Whoa." Because people think it's weird, right? The Amish don't think it's weird.
No.
Being open to life is not weird. It's actually it's what you're supposed to do. And the other thing that's weird, right? And I'm so glad I don't have to do this anymore, is what's with this bullshit with working outside of the house?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I got to tell a little story. So when my husband and I first got married, we moved into this little house in Switzerland. He had a job. I was homemaker. We were trying to get pregnant right away because we got married and I had a 3-year-old. So we were already a family. We were a family. And we just didn't want to have a big gap between our daughter and the next ones. And it didn't take us very long to, be laying in bed one morning going, this doesn't feel right. Like, you're never here. Yep. What is the point? What are we doing? And that's kind of when we just set our sights to Jerusalem, to die the 1,000 deaths, Luke. Right. Because, and that's what I was noticing in the conversation just now. You have to count the cost, right? You don't get to have your cake and eat it too, which seems to me like that's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah.
That's the promise, right? Women can have children and a career.
Right.
Well, and I want to say this too, is like, you have to abandon the idea or the modern virtue of expedience. Like, this is a slow roll. Like, yes. I mean, I got my sights set on what maybe might happen in 20 years, because it's going to take me that long to like remodel this house and develop the land and put in the projects that I hope to put in to like make this, like, slowly building that infrastructure. And that goes against the mind that I currently have. But I also like have all these other competing interests. Like, I want to be a good father. Like, this goes back to like right now, I could easily be seen as a very lazy contractor because I'm helping my wife get out the door with the kids in the morning. I'm showing up at the customer's house about 9:30 with the materials that I need to like expedite the project during the day. And then I'm like pretty much, nose to the grindstone all day. But I'm still out of there by 4 because I want to be home for dinner. And I don't want to live my life any other way. Mm-hmm. And if I have to compromise on anything, it's going to be like whatever this, we can live in smaller and smaller means, especially if I can like redistribute my labor into like all these other ways of making ends meet, mm-hmm. like alternative economies, for instance, like bartering, but like I can go remodel your, paint your kitchen or redo your dining room, and you can give me. That's what I'm doing in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. I'm getting a cow for tearing out a bunch of trim and putting up some new trim, and and painting that and making it look beautiful. And that's what I'm going to get a cow in exchange for that. Cow and half
No.
pig.
Well, you're going to get
Is-
to go in the freezer. You have to say, right? To go in the freezer.
Oh yeah, because yes.
Not
It's-
one that's going to be.
I'm not getting into actual. Yeah.
But with that, I mean, that's the Amish, the guy I buy feed from. He's probably only 40, and he's got 8 kids already. But feed is only his side hustle. His main job is he's a carpenter, and he's usually if I go there during the day, he's usually off on a job. But he takes his older sons with him. Right? They work, and actually, when we had a metal roof put on our house during COVID, and we hired an Amish guy, and he had his 2 sons with him, right? And I love talking to him. All they wanted to talk about was hunting. Hey, Mike, and you get a lot of deer around here? Yeah. And then when he was here, it was kind of a funny story. I had to do something with my bees, so I had my bee suit on, and I'm coming around the barn, and he's coming from the other direction. And this is the Amish guy, and they're supposed to be so taciturn. He goes, "Hey, Mike, where you heading? Outer space?" But he was really funny. You know what I mean? So, but that's the beauty of it is, is you can. It goes back to an earlier age where this idea of handing on a trade or a livelihood, right?
Right.
Which is a good thing. And, I'm so glad I don't have to work outside of the house anymore. And I realized, and it was so hard on my wife especially for a lot of time I had to work 2 jobs. And I was a Waldorf teacher, and then I teach college at night. And then I was just doing college teaching for 15 or 20 years. But that was such bullshit too. Why am I doing this? This is dumb. Yeah. Right? It's slavery, but they have benefits. Yeah.
Well, like when I'm in conversations like this, talking about counting the cost and something's got to give, and you have to be willing to make those sacrifices, like stick 4 kids in a bedroom and just say, that's how it is, right? Get along or not.
Or somebody's moving out. Yeah.
Figure it out. But a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but we have no chance. I have no chance of getting that, and I'm just going to say it flat out. There's a lot of whining in this generation of people who just think that it has to be somehow easily accessible. It's never been easily accessible to build your own life. Never. And I, as a 17-year-old, as an 18-year-old, was homeless, hitchhiking all over the country, living in a tent or sleeping in the back of a 18-wheeler and eating nothing. And but I chose to have something better for myself. And I worked my way in that direction. I had no clue where to start. I had no money. I had nothing. By the time I was 19, I was pregnant and a single mother. Like all my future looked even more grim and bleak, right? And then when I got married, my husband's like, I can't live in Canada. I got to provide for a family. I got to work. I got to know what this is about, right? And I'm not going to do it in a foreign country. And so we lived in a city, and I was just like, oh my God, where's my dream?
I'm stuck in a cage.
I'm stuck. I was so stuck. And it, like Luke said, this is a slow roll, man. Like this is a slow roll. But I just want to encourage people who are watching that it's not impossible. And if you desire that thing and you work towards it, you will suddenly find yourself in the middle of your dream come true. And it took me actually like 10 years to realize that. Actually, at one point I was like in the middle of it, right? Right, you, Michael? There's a big buzz.
White noise.
I don't think that's Michael. Okay, it's gone now. It's good. So anyway, I just want to make that point because Luke Freeman and Lukey are perfect examples. When I first got to know Lukey, he was living in the city, going insane because all he wanted to do was have a piece of land. And I just keep reminding him, look at you now. Luke, is that you? Was that bad for you, Lukey?
Yeah, there's something going on with your mic, Luke.
Yeah, that's you. Yeah.
I don't know if it's your mic. Maybe not. Yeah, and I don't even understand how that was expedited in the last couple of years. But it's also like, right now our dining room is our living room. Our living room is our bedroom. The upper level has no heat. We got to remodel the upper level, and then we'll eventually move in there. My wife's like, hey, the kids need bedrooms before you expand the garden. And I said, okay. Because I promised her I would only plant garlic last fall. And then I ended up with a small nursery this spring. And we're only a year into this establishing the garden here. And it's like, it's already way too big. And I need to scale things back. I got to remember, like, it is a slow roll. But it's also like, they're counting the cost. That's an interesting, it's an interesting idea because for me, like I'm definitely in that mindset, like because of the fact that I've made the decision to start my own business and do some of those things. It's afforded me to be able to take like a ridiculous amount of time off of work. But granted, my wife over the last basically 3 years she's worked pretty much full time, and we've had to rely on grandparents and a nanny to like look after the kids. And now that's too much. That's reaching a boiling point. And she's finally able to take a step back from her employment and be home with the kids now. And luckily that's happening like sooner rather than later. But none of that was a given, like it is hard because like it takes so much money to make some of these things happen. And I know that like, I don't want to sound like a whiny person either, but it's like, you got to get really nimble. You got to get really nimble and really adaptable to try to like navigate this. So it means you got to be like turned on 24/7. And like I've heard Shari talk about that because it's like navigating scheduling. And Luke, you probably have to like, I can't even imagine what your schedule is like right now. Holy moly. Plus running a small business. I remember you in the last video with Shari, you were talking about basically you taking a step back from what you were doing to like running a business now. And like, that's a whole nother can of worms, like what it takes to do that. And then have children on top of that, and then try to put in a garden, it's just trying to do way too much sometimes. But at the same time, it's like, it's not even about time management. It's just like it really is like kind of just building this this life where the things that you prioritize most, you're capable of actually or like that vision that you have, like you're trying to step into it. So you're doing what's necessary to take that next step. And it's always requiring you to shift and move. It's like building one of my favorite poems. In fact, I found it in the shed here, in this old shed it's called The Beaver. And I'd read it to you, but it's, I suppose I could.
Yeah, read it.
Finish.
Read it.
Here it is. There's the tile. I spruced it up for you. Here it is. The Beaver. To build, Lord, that is a vocation. I speak of my passion, architecture. Of course, one should build on a rock, but what the flip is there in doing anything easy? My element is to struggle. It is water that allures and tells me to build a safe and steady house on a moving stream of a river. Moving as life does, swiftly. What an adventure. With patience and ingenuity, one can do anything.
Mhm.
But I am one who loves to swim against the current, to build something lasting in all my own work at the very core of life. Oh, yes, Lord, if you would give me some of your living water, I would build your paradise for you.
Wow.
Just this idea of building a home on a moving river, like that's, dude, beavers are telling us a lot of stuff. We got to pay attention.
And Luke, did you found that tile in your old barn, didn't you?
Yeah, it's in the chicken coop. It was in the what I've turned into a chicken coop. So yeah, and I when I first read it, I was like, "What is this?" And then I read it again like a couple months later, and I was like, "Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for this little nugget."
I'm glad to hear this, Cord. I'm glad I'm glad it's helpful. You know, like I'm listening to the conversation and we're telling stories, we're talking about our frustrations, we're talking about how we see the world, and it's not average. And I just know because I've been doing this forever that a lot of people really don't want to hear it. Like they just don't. I don't know why. And I just pray for them.
Well, it's, and I think, I don't know. So in my experience, right, is since we got our family mostly on real food,
Mhm.
I mean, we have to get some things from a grocery store,
Mhm.
but in general, almost all the meat we eat, we raised, and most of the vegetables, almost all. And we have a clean well, which is good. And
Yeah.
I make I make a lot of meat, and we made wine too, from our own grapes. But what you noticed is, well, I noticed. So once we got off city water, we were on city water for
Oof.
about 10 years ago. Even though we weren't drinking it, it's still getting in your pores when you take a shower and stuff.
Mm.
I noticed how much healthier everybody became, and how, it used to be common for over the course of a year, for at least 1 week in the winter, everybody had some really horrible flu, where everybody's throwing up, right? None of that happened. And we had my mother who had dementia. Her health was not great. And she was living with us for 7 years. She got sick only twice in that 7 years.
Mm.
And that was toward the end of her life. And this is the thing, we talk about the payoffs, right?
Yeah.
And so and people, and this came up actually, I don't know if you saw it with some of the recent hearings in Washington with Bobby Kennedy and all these people who are advocates for real food, but also in other things. People complain about how expensive organic food is, or how challenging it is to raise your own. What's more expensive, that or being on prescription drugs for your entire life? And I was shocked. So you're talking about remodeling. We this house, we moved in here almost 10 years ago, built in 1860. And we've done a lot of remodeling. In fact, right now, my wife is in the other room painting because we finally had to put new cabinets in the kitchen because they were falling off the walls. But so what happened is, my son, who is a contractor like you guys, he came to help me put the cabinets in. And and my wife was gone. She went to visit her mom, and so we went out, took him out to dinner one night. And we're talking just about stuff. And I said, it just occurred to me, so how many of your peers, and he's 34, do you think are on some kind of medication, whether it's antipsychotics or antidepressants or what? And he looked at me and said, at least half. He goes, no, probably 3/4.
Mm-hmm.
3/4 of the people in their 30s on drugs permanently. And I was stunned. It never occurred to me that it would be young people, but I guess it is young people who's
Yeah.
And I checked in with my 32-year-old son. He said, "Yeah, same thing. They're all on this." And that's why isn't that the thing everybody talks about all the time? You know, and we're served. People are served shit food to keep them medicated for their lives. You know, there's even I was shocked to see that Bobby Kennedy said, if the Trump administration gets into office, one of the first things they're going to do is go after chemtrails. I'm like, all right, my man. But yeah. I mean, we live in a poisoned environment, a poisoned food environment.
Yeah.
And there is an antidote to that, and it's not expensive.
You know, when we were in the lockdowns, I kept wondering, like, we were having this supply chain issues, and I kept thinking, what's going to happen if for some reason people can't get their anti-anxiety or antidepressant or anti-schizophrenic or antipsychotic
medication? Yeah.
Oh, like it would really, those zombie apocalypse movies would, like, you know, and it reminds me, here's where I go with those thoughts. I remember Exxon Mobil, the tanker that spilled all the oil. And I remember thinking how shocked I was when it happened. I'm like, oh, well, that, you know, accidents happen, right? But then they had no contingency plan for cleanup.
Right.
So like, and then I started seeing this everywhere, where all of a sudden, you know, there's all this industrial stuff going on, but if something goes wrong, there's no plan in place for that. Right? Like we have a gold mine, and one of the tailings dams broke, and all this cyanide went down a mountain slope and into one of the most pristine lakes in British Columbia called Quesnel Lake, and then washed down the Horsefly River. And they never even got a fine. Nobody got fired, and it was and there was no cleanup because they have no plan.
Gangsters, right? You know? But here, speaking of problems with supply chain problems, you don't have to worry about this in Canada right now, but we're facing this shutdown in the States of the dock workers union. So I think they're shut down. I don't know if it's going on with it. I haven't heard. But I was like, well, what do I need if the ports are all closed that comes from outside of the country? So what do you think I had to go out and get? That's right, coffee. Yeah. Well, but here, you'll like this. Now, and my friend Jonathan Geltner told me this, and I didn't know this. He's a pretty astute guy. Now, during the revolutionary times, they didn't have coffee, and they had tea. But you know what they use to wake up in the morning?
Chicory, dandelion.
A clove of garlic and a shot of whiskey.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I'm just telling you right now, that's stuff you can do here at home.
Yeah, that's an honestly.
I probably shouldn't say this in public. I have a still, but but I don't have. We're gonna make some brandy pretty soon, my son and I.
Cool. You know what, Michael? I can say this in public because I don't have it anymore. But my oldest daughter's father, when I was living with him, he had a still, and it was like made by the full moon because you had to go out at night when nobody could see, and you needed the full moon so you could see. And you know, used to keep buckets of what did he use now? I'm trying to remember. I think it was grain.
Yeah.
Corn. Something like that. He had a bunch of old wrecked cars in this like car graveyard, and he would put all these buckets in the trunks of these cars and let them heat up in the summertime, and they'd just be like fermented and add yeast to those, and they would ferment, and then you know we'd haul it all down to the still and make moonshine. And man, I never drank that stuff because I saw people do the strangest things on that stuff. It was bizarre. I'm just like, I'm not doing it. No,
but I'm covered in case I can't get coffee. I'm covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have I've grown for the last, ever since I started growing things again. Well, it took a few years. I started growing tobacco. So I've got a relatively decent sized tobacco crop that I quit smoking. I don't vape anymore. I'm not addicted to nicotine at all, but I grow tobacco and I cure the leaves. And I have these jars lined up in our pantry of tobacco that I ended up giving to my neighbor, which is probably not a good thing. Maybe I'm supporting his habits.
Well, it's probably better for him than the crap he buys at the store.
That's what I told him. I said, hey, there's no pesticides, there's no herbicides on this, there's no
additives,
fillers, there's no stabilizing agents, there's nothing except for this naturally fermented. Actually, you're getting cream of the crop. This has been aging for the last 4 years, so here you go. He's thrilled, and now he's starting to grow his own tobacco. He's like, what do I do with this? But
ATF's on the way over.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about vices, but we're also talking about things that we've given up to the powers that be, right? Like, not just the vices, but everything. Like our cereal in the. I mean, I don't eat any of this stuff anymore. It's so bizarre because I'm a carnivore now. But and after 25 years of gardening, or 30 years of gardening, actually, like intense self-sustaining gardening. I've had to move into a new phase of my life, which is fine. It's okay. I'm hoping I can get back to vegetables one day, but at the moment it's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I think I was actually injured by engineered bioweapons. Let's just say that. And it's not a conspiracy theory.
At the grocery store, right, Shari?
Yeah, at a grocery store. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't Frosted Flakes.
Although those might be a missile, maybe not an atom bomb, but
yeah, but Luke, you haven't been able to say anything since your mic went crazy. Can't hear you. Shoot. Have you got internal speakers on internal microphone on your computer?
Man.
No, still can't hear you, Luke. Maybe. Okay.
He's got notes.
He does. And look how nice and neat they are.
They are. They're very orderly. Yeah. Man.
I'm not sure how much time you have, Michael, but if you have to leave, please just,
yeah,
bid us goodbye. You did say it's your CSA day, so.
Yeah. So Yawn God says, can't you have like 18 cannabis plants in Michigan? I don't know, but I don't want to grow cannabis. When I first became legal in Michigan, people said, you gotta start growing. And I didn't want to have to stay out on my property with a shotgun all night.
Well, here's what
the varmints away.
I started growing some cannabis plants simply because it was like, I remember when all these dispensaries opened up, and they aren't selling. I don't even know what to call it. What are they selling? It's like
it's totally hopped up.
It's like a completely different product, and so I'm not interested in what they're producing at a commercial industrial scale. What I wanted was some George Washington weed. That's what I wanted. I wanted like just whatever that was a long time ago. And so anyways, I grew a couple plants, but I'm not going to talk about my relationship with cannabis in this conversation, because it's always it's like a ex-girlfriend that I keep on breaking up with and getting back with. I don't know when that's ever going to end. But
I see Stephanie says, now I'm looking forward to the upcoming coffee shortage. Glad we could help.
So Luke Freeman, do you want to try your mic again? No. Can't hear you.
Okay. Well, that's
Bummer. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could go out and come back in if you want. You could try that. It's always my last resort. Shut it off, turn it on.
Reset button. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why we have to feel bad about tobacco, moonshine, and weed. And I know I'm saying this on Girl Country, but I'm saying it anyway. And mead, when people will poo-poo that to a certain extent, but then they'll get their little Monday to Friday pill box out and pop all their pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And they're all, so many. And that, when I ended up in a really bad place and I was in a psych ward, the medication that I was taking, one of the nurses said to me, that stuff is worse than street drugs. It's so addictive. And we have so many people in here because of it. I was kind of like, okay, good. It wasn't me.
We actually, during 2020, when they rolled the vaccines out, and everybody was, well, actually before, but everybody was freaked out about COVID. We had a lot of people join our CSA that year because they were scared shitless of food shortages. And some people were insisting that we wear masks when we drop out vegetables. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. And we lost customers, and we had people really hostile about it. I didn't care and I'm thinking, okay, wait. And these are the people who lined up first to get the shots, right? And like, what good is organic food, biodynamically raised, going to do for you, raw milk, if you're going to shoot your body full of hormones and chemicals?
I know.
What good could it possibly do?
I know.
Yeah.
But they do it. It happened. Some people do it as a marker of social status or something. And it's so weird. It's it's very much an urban phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because you guys probably know this. Out in the country, where people are a lot smarter than in colleges and universities. I hate to say it. People have much more common sense, and they live much closer to the real than elsewhere. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me to see these people who are willing to shoot their bodies full up of drugs and chemicals and who knows what else, but still want to eat organic food.
Well, I mean, you're living on the land. Well, there's an echo, I think, Michael, on your end. When you're living on the land, you're constantly, exposed to dirt and bugs and bites and scratches and infections and dead animals. And, you're not a germaphobe. I think people that live in urban settings often lose track of that kind of a reality, and they get very sterile. And so if there's a bug out there, it's a monster. It's not just a little bug, right? And I'm not saying COVID was nothing, but at the same time, they have no clue about how powerful the healing capability of the body is. They don't know about natural immunity. They don't know, they may have allergies and asthma because they've never been exposed to dirt, right? And so these things are terrifying, right? I'm trying to be really nice to everyone.
Yeah, I'm trying to be nice, but you people are making it hard. Yeah.
I'm just like, go get dirty and make your kids dirty,
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I walk through the world covered in bacteria. I just want to let you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can hear me now?
No, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We probably all have healthy gut microbiomes, right? Okay, I'm back, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, totally. Yeah, loud and clear.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, sorry about that. But I think, Lukey, I just wanted to say that poem you read was really amazing. And I feel like the mental image I've had in my mind, well, I guess two, now that I think about it, but just, I think the lifestyle we're talking about, and especially my experience my wife and I just trying to support ourselves with our own business, which it's a seasonal gift store. It's kind of, you know, farm inspired, but kind of grew into its own thing. But it's this feeling of you know, farming or, you know, running your own business. It just feels like being on a sailboat on the ocean, you know. And the waves, you know, they can just really, really buffet you. You know, a storm comes and it can really wreak havoc. You know, and I think, to me, I mean, us describing, you know, folks kind of just like in mainstream culture, they're on the ocean liner. You know, huge, you know, cruise ship. They don't really feel the waves. You know, they're all in the ocean. They're all in the boat together. If that boat sinks, they're all in a load of trouble. You know, they're all in a load of trouble. But at the same time, I mean, you know, being on a sailboat on the ocean, it has its struggles too. And I think that relationship with the chaotic waters is something that I'm really, that's kind of where I'm at, is like, I was going for a run the other morning, and my runs can, well, they're almost like a spiritual practice, mental health practice. Honestly, it keeps me sane. And I just had an image of Christ, you know, showing me how to walk on water.
Oh, nice.
And that is just so much, I feel like, where I'm at right now in life is the it's okay, going to, you know, Charles Taylor Buffered, the buffered self. I mean, I think the modern buffered life is like the life on the ocean liner. You're buffered from the waves. And I think what we're discussing is a life in touch with the soil. And in that life, it's unbuffered. There are some waves that can that can hit you. And I think to me, it's that reliance on, you know, the mercy of our Lord, and I feel like also the mercy of Our Lady that can keep us above the watery chaos, you know, learning to walk on water. And also, I mean, another thing that just came to mind, I guess it was when you were talking, Michael, was I mean, there's also the just kind of leaning into the arms of Our Lady. I'm this weird, I grew up evangelical and kind of now don't know where to find myself. You know, we go to a non-denominational church, but I pray the rosary and have been just really, really helped by a devotion to Mary. And
Well,
there's something about that mercy.
I think what happens, and tell me if this is your experience, what I noticed for myself, and this has been going on 30 some years now, the more I got attracted to living in harmony with the land, the more my sensibilities became more Catholic neo-pagan. and a few weeks, maybe a couple months now, but Mike and I on the Regeneration podcast interviewed the English writer Sebastian Morello about the sacred hunting.
Ooh, okay.
Because he wrote an article called "The Theurgy of Deer Stalking," which I loved, and somebody told him I loved it, and he got a hold of me through my publisher. But then we interviewed him, and he told me this great story, which I think you'd appreciate. That he and his friend were in England, and they were stalking deer, and they were having zero luck. They'd get close to a deer, and they'd spook it, and it would take off, and they'd happen again. And he said, he tells his friend, "We forgot to do the most important thing." "What's that?" "We forgot to pray to the Lady of the Hunt and Saint Hubert the Hunter." So they got on their knees and they prayed to the Lady of the Hunt and Saint Hubert the Hunter, and they got 3 deer within 15 minutes.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What's crazy, Michael, when I really started praying the rosary consistently it was 2 deer seasons ago. And I remember I went to deer camp with my father-in-law. I didn't grow up hunting, but my father-in-law has been teaching me. He's a big deer hunter. And I went down to southern Arkansas with him to his deer camp. And I just remember, you know, waking up early, getting in the side-by-side, you know, driving out to the deer stand, you know, praying the rosary in my head and just having, I mean, imaginative visions of, you know, Mary in the woods.
Oh, wow.
There's really something, yeah, I mean, it's, I think you really capture it, Michael, in what you write about sophiology, but she is there. I don't know. I don't really have the terminology to describe it, but anyway, I have this powerful connection between, yeah, deer hunting and Mary, praying to Mary.
I pray the rosary a lot in that deer blind. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For whatever reason, I'm just thinking of blood, sweat, and tears pouring into the soil. And it is a womb, you know? And it's like, I just think of that, just that idea of fertility that is always, I don't have the words. I don't know. All these things are just like words that are dancing around in my mind as you guys are talking, you know, that are hard to articulate.
Well, Lukey, maybe, I don't know if this will kind of pick up what you're trying to communicate, but fertility is something like death plus fermentation.
Yeah.
Which brings it back to me.
Yeah, it does.
It does. Hold on, I got a quote for you. Check it out. Oh, where'd it go? It was so good.
That was good, Luke. Death plus fermentation.
Here it is. Now, these native Mediterranean cults were concerned with that basic principle: death of the outworn, the fertilization of Mother Earth, of the whole creation of animals and of every living thing, rebirth and growth. This was particularly so in the cult of Dionysus and the worship of the great mother goddess, under whatever guise they appeared. And that's from a book on mead making.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's it. I mean, that's what we were talking about, right? It's to be a farmer is to be connected with life and death. I mean, people talk about the life, but guess what? You know, we're connected to death as well. I mean, I've had to kill animals, not just for food, but because they were sick or whatever, right? Like we had a feverish goat one time and he would not get better and I couldn't let him suffer, so I had to take him out. On the other hand, I've had to midwife goats, reaching my arm all the way up inside of them to pull out a baby. You'd have to do it with goats. Lambs, I don't think are as big a trouble, and cows are not at all.
Mm-hmm.
But so it was both, and then we later ate that goat.
Mm-hmm.
I was both midwife and butcher.
Right.
But you're connected to it, you know. And the thing is, when you're connected to that in such a real way, and this goes for hunting as well, you don't take it for granted.
No.
Not like, you know, growing up in the city and eating. I mean, this is how I grew up too, right? Eating meat coming in a package or something. You don't. It's easy to take that for granted because you're not connected to it in the same way, and of course, not everybody can be connected to it in the same way. And you know, some people don't have to, but people, when they go, "How could you do that? It's so mean," and you have no idea what it's like to live in that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
To what will become your food, and it's a sacred relationship.
It is.
You know, when I think of, especially with taking care of the bees and the lambs, I mean, you know, I have such deep feeling for those animals. Not chickens, not as much, but I do. I mean, you know, but you know, it's one of the kinds of love, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of love, but it's the kind of love that it's probably closest to storge, the love of responsibility, right? Where I'm responsible for them, like a father for his family, right?
Yeah.
It's the love of duty, and it's a real love. You know, it's certainly not friendship, because They don't know who I am. He's that guy that feeds us. Let's go check him out. That's what the lambs are like. Because when my wife goes to call them, they won't come. Like, I don't know who that is. You know who that is? But if I say, hey, they just come running. Then they don't have food, and they're like, why did they come up here again? But you get this feeling of love through responsibility for them, or how to describe it. And the same thing even with hunting, right? There is a love and a sacredness that takes place in that activity, or at least it should. It certainly has for me. And as we were talking, my son was talking about my father-in-law, who's a big hunter, and he told my son, I didn't know he told him this. He goes, Aiden, when you shoot a deer, the first thing you do is you thank the animal and you thank God.
Yeah.
And the second thing you do is you take a little piece of the liver raw and you put it in your mouth and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
That's to be connected.
Yeah. 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 That relationship to animals that you birth out and then kill. That's got to be one of the most complex things that I had to go through in the beginning. When we first got goats, we were in Telegraph Creek and we were milking them. And then, in order to have milk, you got to breed them. And then when you breed them, you birth them out. And then when you raise those kids up, you got to butcher them because, you can't sustain 50 goats over time, right?
Mm-hmm. Because nature is super abundant.
Because it is super abundant. That's right. And so, and you need the meat. And, I remember the first time it had to be done. Of course, my children named all the kids, the baby goats, the first year. That was the last time we named them because we're not eating, Dot or whoever. We're just eating meat.
Yeah.
And so there was this real tension about the whole thing. My husband was loath to do it. He took my son to do it with him, who was 11, and we didn't know if that was going to traumatize. There's all this stuff going on. And in the end, I'm carving up the meat, like I'm packaging it. They did the big work, and I'm doing the fine work, and I'm literally drooling.
Well, this looks good. Yeah.
Because I'd been living on hamburger from a grocery store, for like 6 months. And I was just like, my body was like, give me that food now. Like,
Get in my belly. Yeah.
And then what happened the following year was, yay, it's time to butcher. Because you needed that meat to exist. And without it, anyway, it was just such an interesting learning curve for me.
And it's so interesting, especially when you shoot a deer. And it's instinctive.
Right.
The kind of joy that goes through the family
Mm-hmm.
when they see me dragging a deer in from the woods, and the kids were like, oh, yeah, right? And they're happy. And they're not happy because the animal's dead.
No, they're happy because food.
And it's like that story that you told me recently, Shari, about your sister and how her husband wouldn't take a shot.
Yes.
You saw the does, and how the native elder said you dishonored the animals. They were giving themselves to you.
Right.
That's it. I told that one at dinner the other night.
Yep.
Because that's what it feels like. That is what it feels like.
Yeah.
They are giving themselves over to you. It's a sacred interchange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sacred economy.
Yeah. Man, it makes it, what it brings into play for me is all these like very real embodied, like this whole idea of the family, mothers, fathers, wives, husbands, children, sons, daughters. Like it's this, how all those the microcosm exists that I'm living in, but those patterns also exist at a cosmic level that are like that I feel like are also what I'm encountering directly walking outside into the backyard and playing around. It's like those are there's almost a recovery of meaning that's occurring and informing me, bringing that back from the macrocosm into the microcosm again, you know, and what the home is and what the home is supposed to be. You know, but they're actually really hard for me to talk about in any articulate manner, because it's like what you guys are talking about even there is like, you know, the animal sort of submitting to you, and like what occurs in a marriage even, and between the masculine and the feminine, and
Oh yeah, it's everything. Well, like Michael started this whole conversation with,
everything all at once.
it's the marriage of heaven and earth.
Yes.
Right? And marriage, you know, it's not just heaven and earth, it's a marriage. And that is a world, right? Of all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus.
Well, you know what, guys? We're almost 2 hours in here,
Yeah.
and we're not even close to being finished. We could do this for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think maybe I'll just give everybody like a last word. And I mean, I'm down to do this again anytime. So if you guys are up for it, that would be fun. I just keep thinking while we're having this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'll just maybe, well, this is the question I'm asking, like, how do we press on people how doable this all is? Like, because I know none of us expected to be here. Right? If I can guess correctly, none of us expected to be here, like not in this conversation, but where we are in our lives, right? Doing what we're doing. But it was a deep love, and it manifested itself. And for that reason, I think it's doable, you know, like I see a lot of despair in the world today. People think they can't do the things they want to do. They're trapped in their parents' basement or whatever the case is. And I'm just like, oh, stop. You know, that's what I feel like saying.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, so I'll just give you guys a last word. And if you want to touch on that, that's fine. If you have something else to say, that's great too.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, a couple of things. Slow and steady wins the race.
Right.
I think people get overwhelmed because they think, I can't do it. Well, you can do a little bit. You can, I mean, we started like in that little garden. It was mostly shade in the Detroit suburbs, but then we got a house that had a double lot. You know, we had a really nice garden there. Wasn't enough to raise a family on, but it was nice. You know, and we actually made it beautiful. It was a potager. It was like a monastery garden. And then we moved up. We got we got a 2-acre plot outside of Detroit, and then we ended up with 10 acres. But so it was kind of did incrementally. We always had, you know, and help that my wife was really all about this too. That we, you know, we're partners in that way. We had something that I think was good. But the other thing is the instinct. People are talking about, you know, being a child. And I remember, now that I grew up in the most this environment. I grew up in Detroit, which is and grew up basically a juvenile delinquent in Detroit. And seriously, I was voted most likely to end up on the methadone program. But the intuition, though, when I was 5 years old, and my mother would take me to Farmer Jack, the grocery store chain, and I would say, or maybe I was 7, and she said, "Can I look at the seeds?" And she would park me in front of the seed wall, and where they had all this, and I would just be,
"Oh yeah,
can I have a garden?" And then my dad dug me a little plot that was like 2 foot by 2.5, where I planted radishes and carrots and forgot about, and then months later, like there's stuff that grew, but it was all weeds, right? But you have that kind of intuition and trust it. Trust it. That's the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Right. When you get those kinds of intuitions, and I think everybody gets some kind of intuition like that.
Yeah.
Whether it's about farming or whatever else, but it was for me. But there was no predictor. If you would have told me when I was 17 that I would end up a biodynamic farmer, a professor and I'd have 9 kids, I would have laughed in your face.
Yeah. And it would have probably sounded like a nightmare to you at the time. Oh, Luke Freeman, you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, let's see. I just thought it was funny. I took a call. My wife called, and anyway, so I was on a call with my wife. I come back, and you guys are talking about marriage. So, but oh gosh, picking up on that. Yeah, Shari, I just the thought came to mind. It's just, following your love. I mean, it's really like in Dante's Divine Comedy. That I feel like for me that's what I've seen in my life is that when I've followed that love, even if it's an unexpected love, that's led me in the right direction, and it's not always been easy, and sometimes I've wondered how I got to where I got, but there's something true about love, and even when it doesn't make sense. And I think sometimes my rational brain, the kind of optimizing bean counter brain in me, it second guesses, why am I in this relationship, with farming or whatever, and it's like I just have to be. I mean, and I think not everyone is called for a lifestyle of farming, but if you feel that love inside of you, I would say pursue that love.
Mm-hmm. Follow it. Yeah. Lukey?
Yeah, as much as number one, I want to say I'm honored to be a part of this conversation because I'm somebody that deals with imposter syndrome pretty much 24/7. I feel like I'm a fake contractor. I feel like I'm a fake farmer. I feel like I'm a fake everything. But, if I can overcome that within the first couple hours of the day, and actually do the work, literally just get into it, because half of it, it's like all this anticipation anxiety and oh man, I don't think I'm capable of doing that. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so much more capable than I give myself credit for almost every single time. And even sometimes stuff goes wrong, big time, and I'm short-sighted or whatever. But, I would say don't be afraid to get scrappy either. Yeah, LARP hard. Seriously. I think everybody thinks you got to know what you're doing before you get into it. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's, if anything, like I said, I don't know what I'm doing with beekeeping, but I'll listen to 80 hours worth of content in a week and I'll download the whole tome and then I'll start. But I'd also say download the whole tome, but then ride your own intuition. Let that be an auxiliary to this is, you get to now do this your own way. You don't have anybody telling you how to do this or what it needs to be or how big it needs to be. And comparison is the biggest thief of joy. Don't compare yourself to other people and what they're doing, because envy is just, oh man, I struggle with it. It robs me of because in a certain sense I could and the person that has, here's the thing, is you just I heard Jonathan Peugeot talk about this not that long ago. It's the guy who has the tractor and the big farm and all of this it looks amazing and it's extremely impressive, but he's a slave to his debt now suddenly, in a very real way that that he doesn't own any of that stuff. And it sort of undermines I think being able to own a small little patio garden and begin to watch and here's the thing, I'm skipping all around, sorry.
It's good.
Oh man. But each and every single plant, if you just want to grow 2 beds of onions you could spend the next 40 years of your life growing those 2 beds of onions and getting them to be, you know, you'll find after like a whole lifetime, you'll finally realize like maybe a smidgen of what it's like to grow like a decent onion, you know, or something like that, you know, because each and every
Season?
each and every season, but each and every like venture, each and every plant, each and every crop is its own like uh, uh, pursuit or like a whole nother
Dynamo.
world. Yeah,
Dynamo.
it just opens up, and you could follow. So you could just be the person that gets really good at grow. Like maybe you like have 20 different types of basil on your patio, and you're just like super into basil and like growing this chocolate version of things. I don't know. So like I just think you can just do so many cool things all in, and I don't know. And I suppose like maybe that's not inspiring, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's just so easy to get discouraged and so easy to believe that you're not capable of doing these things, but you got to begin proving yourself capable of doing those things, which is just literally just participating in it.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking about? Like, here's my last word. Because I know that as a human being, my default mode is procrastination. And I actually have a theory. I think it's a form of energy saving, you know. And because if you were living off one deer carcass for a whole winter, you wouldn't move much. You know, you gotta procrastinate because you just gotta you gotta make it, right? But here's the thing. I know that about myself. And so I was always putting myself in a position where I had to do the things. So here's a couple examples. We went to buy 2 horses. We came home with 4 horses. 2 of them were pregnant. Within a week, we had 6 horses because the 2 that were pregnant had foaled out, and only 1 of them was rideable. And we had no fences. We had a little goat pen, and they were all in there, and they were almost killing each other because 2 of them had newborn foals.
Fun time.
So like, we were pounding posts and, you know, cutting trees and building, you know, making rails, and, you know, and we got to get these horses out there, and we got them out there. And then I bought a book.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a book called Lions on Horses, how to break a horse. And the guy that I bought the horses from gave me two saddles, 2 old saddles, because he was an outfitter, and they were just trash. I've got a yearling, and then I've got an old mare that he couldn't break. And this guy was like a top-notch horse trainer. And I take him out into an open field because I don't even have a round pen or a riding arena or nothing, none of the things, right? And I start. And one of the things the guy says in the book, John Lyons, great book, by the way, just to read his intro, John Lyons, Lions on Horses, it's called. He says, if you don't make mistakes, you're not doing anything. And I'm just like, oh, that's it. That's my mantra. That's my mantra for the rest of my life, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
And he's like, if you want your horse to be broke, you have to do something, and you're going to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, just go back to step number 3 and start over again. Go back to the step, you know, that you were last successful with, and then do it again. And I'm like, okay. And he made it sound really easy, right? And it was actually really easy. And that's just how I tackled everything. Like when I got the sheep, I'm like, okay, now I have sheep. Now I've got to find a sheep shearer. Now I've got to build a sheep chute. Now I've got to, now I got to find sheep feeders. And how am I going to feed my sheep so that I don't end up with nothing but straw in their fleeces that I want? And do they need to be in the timber? Do they, and you can't learn any of it until you just freaking do it, Mm-hmm. And my sister said something in that last conversation. The one that she was in, she said, you can't learn how to be a parent. You just have to be a parent.
Yeah.
And your children qualify you as a parent, right? You're not a parent. if you have no children.
Yeah.
And we live in this world of university and apprenticeship and preparation. We think if we read the book, we know something. We don't know anything. We don't know it until we've done it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my last word.
It's so
But
good.
this
And I
is
have to add a little
okay.
shout out to Joy and Jared. Those are people I know. Everybody who in the comments.
Yes, Joy and Jared. Yeah, that's right. They're both
People I
in
actually know in the real world. Anybody else I know in the real world? Maybe. Don't know. But definitely those two. So and shout out to everybody else in the comments as well.
Yes.
Man.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. I didn't want to highlight a bunch of comments all the time because I didn't want to distract from the flow. But
Man.
thank you. I was watching them and they were great. And yeah, we'll mull over what we talked about. Maybe we can do this again in it's kind of fun to do it seasonally. Right now we're into fall. And by the way, Michael, I need next time we talk together, I want to know how to make mead. I want you to explain that.
Oh, it's so easy. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.